All right. Well, let me know when you're ready for us to get started. All right, I think we're good. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday evening. Thank you for deciding to spend this Friday with us as we dive and engage into a very important and timely conversation. My name is Jamie Riley. I'm serving as your moderator tonight, and currently I'm reside in Washington, D.C., where I serve as the Director of Racial Equity for the Center for Law and Social Policy. And tonight we will have the opportunity to engage in a very important and necessary dialogue with theater educators around environment, climate, inclusivity, racism as it relates to the experience of Black students within theater, arts, and entertainment. And so tonight I ask that you come with open minds. I ask that you really challenge yourself to lean into the dialogue, focus on gaining something new, focus on reflection and introspection as we really seek to lead change and cultivate an environment where all students can thrive. I know I'm super excited about today. I started my career actually as a middle school social studies teacher. So it's full circle to come back and be able to facilitate this dialogue. So we're going to start off with some introductions. And so we're going to have the panelists of esteemed guests and expertise introduce themselves, and then we'll go into some questions and you all will have some opportunities to ask questions at the end. And so again, thank you for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. And so Corey, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, my name is Corey Mitchell. I am a theater arts teacher at Northwest School of the Arts. I was the first recipient of the Tony Award for Excellence in Theater Education. And just this week, I was named as the first recipient of the Stephen Schwartz Musical Theater Teacher of the Year Award. Hey, so that's me.
Congrats on that.
Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Estella?
Talo Falava, Facilitator Lava, Oloingo or Estella, and greetings. Thanks for having me. My name's Estella Oima Church. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And in every space that I have the privilege of occupying, I hope to bring forth with me all of my ancestors and encourage students to do the same. I am Samoan Afakasi, so I'm half Black, half Samoan. Parents are from Nigeria and Samoa. I'm troop leader of 5311 in Hawthorne, Los Angeles, California. Also executive director of Education Ensemble, a nonprofit here in South LA dedicated to facilitating brave spaces where young people are using their art, both in service and as a form of direct action. And a fun fact, I started working professionally as a stage manager when I was about 13, and my director, I didn't find out until I was well into my 20s. It was John Rubenstein, who would go on to become our Wiz in The Wicked here at the Pantages, and didn't know until I was in the audience at the Pantages. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, thank you, Estella. Donald?
Hi, everybody. My name is Don Emerson. I'm originally from Michigan, and I've loved theater all my life. It's been the one constant in my life. And for me, I've always known what theater can do for an individual, but I've always wanted to change the world. I worked for the Executive Office of the President of the United States, so the White House, and I worked for the Department of Justice doing grants for community-oriented policing. So I've always wanted to sort of change the paradigm in some way. And theater for me is a way to transform, change, and to amplify. So I teach at the Orange County School of the Arts and here in California, and looking forward to our discussion.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Donald. Tiffany?
Hi, my name is Tiffany Karstensen. I am the troop director of McKay High School's Thespian Troop 1981 in Salem, Oregon Thespians. I've been an educator of minority, poverty, and marginalized students for about 25 years, which has helped me on my journey to become an ally. and my mission is to help my students learn and create a space for themselves and a space in this business. Probably a fun fact related to our artistry. We had a really good time with our production of The Wiz that we did a few years ago, where our Dorothy was Chuukese, which is a member of the Pacific Islander culture, and she was an ally, and each group of people that she met as she went through Oz represented a different culture found in our school. So it was really fun to have her have positive interactions with lots of different cultures that represent the halls of our school.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. Roberto?
First of all, congratulations, Corey. You're such an inspiration to the field and to all of us, and we're thrilled with your latest success. You touch our hearts. My name is Roberto Palma. I'm a professor of theater and film studies at California State University, Sacramento. My area is Latin American theater and film, with a sub-area of Latinx and Chicanx theater. My publications are in the area of multicultural theater, with emphasis once again on Latin America and Latinx American drama. And in addition to my playwriting work, I work as a director. I work in that intersection between live performance and digital computerized technology. And so I've been doing that for 20 years, where the written script is always friendly and the technology is always a problem.
Let's hope tonight that's not the case, right? All right, thank you for that. Thank you. Devon? I think maybe on mute.
The mute, yes. First off, thank y'all for having, I'm so happy, and thank y'all for having me on this panel for talented educators. My background in education is math, actually, math teacher. And I'm a rapper, poet, teacher, actor, now director. I write for an educational company called Vocabulary, play many songs through hip hop. And now I teach Shakespeare through hip hop as a Sonnet Man. It started as just a wonderful event, a way to introduce students to Shakespeare, and another way of connecting everybody to Shakespeare, another artistry of making Shakespeare interesting. And that has led to many workshops, working in circuits with different Shakespeare theaters, and also the EDTA regional festivals, as well as the ITF. And now my whole focus is becoming a theater educator, and trying to bring in more hip hop to theater and bringing more diversity to theater. So again, thank y'all for having me on this panel. Fun fact, I have been asked to, in 2016 was the 450th anniversary of Shakespeare's death. And I was invited to the Stratford-upon-Avon to rap all 154 of his sonnets in his sonnet marathon. Took 3 hours. So
wow, there you go. There you go.
Wonderful.
Thank you for that. All right, and last and certainly not least, Cheryl.
Am I okay? Unmute. Hi, I am Cheryl J. Williams. I'm more in the technical aspect of theater. I was told I could perform quite well, but they didn't know that was just me. Yes, I'm an equity stage manager. I've been an equity stage manager for 20-some years. And I sprung off from that and went into, I'm now a professional lighting and sound designer. Have worked both nationally and internationally. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I taught for 12 years at Morgan State University. I've taught at University of Maryland College Park and Baltimore County. I get around. But my main gig was at Morgan State University. And let's see, I recently lost my spouse about 10 days ago. And she was writing a book from her dissertation. African American directors in American theater. And that was her oral history. That was her thesis. And from that, we have traveled all over the country in the last 2 years to get interviews with directors such as Woody King and Clinton Turner Davis and Marjorie Moon from the Billie Holiday Theater. We have collected, I think, 13 or 14 interviews. Over the COVID, she started writing the book before she made her transition. She got up to chapter 5. I think Woody King was the last that she finished. And my goal is to finish writing the book because I think the book is very, very needed and very important to put out there and then eventually turn it into a documentary. Quickly, one fun fact about me is that last week of August and the first week of September, I was in Denmark, Helsinki, Finland, and Sweden, and as a lighting designer. And I learned 6 new light boards in 10 days. I worked in 6 different theaters, 6 different light boards for one show in 10 days. So
Absolutely.
I'm tired.
Well, Cheryl, thank you for that, and want you to know that you're in my thoughts, and I appreciate you for sharing your story. So thank you. All right, and so before we hop in there again, I just want to start off by saying, as our country has been going through a shift for the past couple months, a lot of folks have been using the term, this moment, and I like to remind folks that what we have to take in the opportunity in this moment in history is how we want to engage in this movement. And so it's really about how do we all kind of look internally, look at our practice, look at our bias, our assumptions, our privilege, and think about how we want to contribute to fostering an environment where future generations will experience much more inclusivity, culturally competent learning experiences with learning professionals who understand them and their nuances, their intersections, and their full selves. And so tonight is a great opportunity. I think it's a privilege and opportunity to have educators get together from across the country with different experience to really talk through that and provide some nuggets and continue to serve as leaders and advocates for this work. And so with that being said, we're going to jump in there and have a little dialogue this Friday evening. So first question, and anyone who wants to jump in there, feel free to be brave and jump in there and get us started. So as I was just saying, the United States is in a very interesting and challenging point of its history. We're currently experiencing a conflict of foundational values, which are impacting the idea that our society is built on the idea of equity and equality. We've seen this displayed in reference to the impacts of COVID-19 on Black and Brown communities, and the increasing attention to racially charged killings of Black people by law enforcement and other oppressive systems. It's often been said that art imitates life. How can acting and theater be used to increase awareness and bring others along in the understanding the idea of racial equity? I know there's a lot of buildup to that, so I'll repeat the question part again. How can acting and theater be used to increase awareness and bring others along in understanding the idea of racial equity?
I guess I was the first to unmute. Well, to begin with, I always think about what theater is the opportunity to hold a mirror up to the society to reflect back what it is, and also an opportunity to create a space of what we want the world to be. And but I think one of the first things that I do, and that personally when I work with some of my students, is I always start the year off with living newspaper, because the students who are aware of who they are, aware of the issues that are going on, are the ones that are really create the opportunity for activism. And so I don't just look at it in terms of Black and Brown issues, even though that naturally manifests itself because of the lives that these students lead, but live. But it's also in world events and in environmental events and all of those things that we start off the conversation of taking what is current and in the news and turning it into art.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in on any thoughts with that?
Yeah, I wanna add to what Corey just said. It's definitely a reflective space, but I also think that theater is a healing space and a place to seek out reconciliation. And um, for students, I mean, we get to move past catharsis and allow them through the work to find their own path to whatever that healing and reconciliation needs to look like. Because like Corey says, that those are the issues that tend to bubble to the surface because those are the lives that they lead. And oftentimes when we're seeking healing or reconciliation outside of ourselves and outside of our communities of color, it's not there, which we're witnessing, right? Like it's not easily available. It's not just going to come to us. And so in our theater space together, our shared space, we get to absolutely invent what that looks like. And I think that that is a sacred space that needs to be protected.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. Estelle, let me ask you a question about that, if you don't mind. Is that so as you kind of engage in your artistry, your practice, your calling, is the way that you just describe the space and kind of the healing and the restoration, is that intentional, or did that materialize because there was a need from the students to have that space? Or was that kind of what you went into knowing that that's what needed to be facilitated or fostered?
A little bit of both. I believe that space between people, our relationships are paramount, more so than the actual space around us, the theater building. So yeah, I kind of went into my profession with that in mind, but I also think that my experiences where I have been teaching have reinforced it. As we have lost our physical space, my kids and I have had to make sure that we reinvent the space over and over again and protect whatever is sacred between us. And so students have taught me and retaught me to remember that that's what's most important. And so it's a little bit of me, going into it on my own, or, just having it with me. And that is cultural. That comes from my heritage, both Samoan and Nigerian. In Samoan, the word is va, and the space between people is divine. And so I bring that with me, but also students have taught me many lessons about this time and time again and in different ways.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts about that? Okay.
This is Cheryl. If I can remember the question correctly, I really think that at some point we're going to, in the new norm, get away from some of these dated scripts, the ones we're doing over and over again that has no reflection, no anything to do with people of color, but yet we can convince ourselves that but these are our money makers. And I think the new norm is taking us from, well, right now, nobody's making any money, so let's pick up and work with that. And I think that we have to begin to write our own scripts, because when we write our own scripts, then we're living it. So yeah, I really think it's going to be important to get away from the dated, predominantly white scripts, and begin to incorporate other scripts, even if we have to write them ourselves, even if the kids have to write them themselves, or we as the educator,
right,
help with the writing. so that we can get to know ourselves and see ourselves on stage,
Right.
doing our work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Go for it, Roberto.
Ms. Williams, giving your comment, and it's very appropriate, and I would like to share it with our distinguished audience, but also with our colleagues. It's interesting that we're talking about this very same subject we've been planning now for a couple of weeks, but particularly in my place and at my institution at California State University, Sacramento. And without trying to be too verbose, allow me to give you a little bit of the background because it connects directly to what Ms. Williams is saying. At our institution, we have 32,000 students and a very strong and dynamic multicultural environment. Also, our Department of Theater and Dance and Film, we have a strong history when it comes to multiculturalism. We are the first university that had the first Chicano theater, university theater on campus that came in the late 60s. And also our first African-American Sons and Ancestors theater company west of the Mississippi. So our curricular structure is very much rooted in many ways in multiculturalism, and we're very proud of it. And we have a very distinguished faculty that follows the calling, right? But in the last 2 days in particular, which I think this is why this experience and this conference is so apropos, is that I'm very raw right now because the fact is that given our multicultural reality for the past 2 weeks in our department, we have been going through an incredible transition brought about by our students, and particularly our students of color, and more specifically, African-American students. So for instance, yesterday, we had a Zoom conference with 90-some students, alumni and current students, African-American students, talking about what we as a department, who's very committed to multiculturalism, right, needs to be doing to address the issues that we're now facing in our society, and particularly with Black Lives Matter. And we are being pushed. It's truly a wonderful revolution, but we're being pushed by our students. What are you going to do? And in part of the dialogue, and it was a very strong dialogue. This dialogue, by the way, our meeting yesterday with the president of the university, with the provost of the university, with the dean of the university, and the entire faculty, right, lasted nonstop for 6.5 hours. And for 6.5 hours, we listened to African-American students who are really, really angry, who are really, really concerned about not only their own personal lives, but about the state of the art and theater. And part of the discussion from our dear students, whom we'll all love, even though they're angry at us, right, is what are you doing in terms of new texts? You need to start discussing the new texts. Yes, we do have the old war horses, right? We have Hansberry and we have August Wilson and et cetera, but enough is enough. And we need to have new scripts, and the new scripts have to be written, as I'm telling them, by you. You have to create that forum. It's the only way that our students are going to then find enthusiasm and commitment to the theater. Yes, these historical plays are the war horses of dramatic American literature, right? But we need to move beyond that, and they want that desperately. So I wanted to add that to your comments, Ms. Williams, because I think you're right on target there.
Awesome, awesome. Yes, Don, go for it.
So I would just add that I always want to be really careful as we start to prescribe how to enact change, because it is such a local thing. It's different for every school. The makeup of each school is so different. So we can do some broad strokes here and talk about, obviously, every school can add additional text, curriculum change, invest in people that that are anti-racist. I took a play, I did this adaptation of an Ibsen play, and I took it, it was An Enemy of the People, and I took it to London. And so this play was about Flint, Michigan, but essentially it was in mostly all white cast. And my director, as I was doing this adaptation, was like, how are you going to do this? And I said, trust me, I've done this type of work before with my theater for social justice background. I can get it done. And it was well received, but it was that tailoring, that tinkering with the population of who we have on stage and who's going to be in the audience that I think resonated better than to try to come up with something that was being forced to fit.
So, one thing I'll add, and I want to take us to the next next topic of conversation. Something that I've heard and listening to you all speak is there's this idea, a need for spaces for students of color. So first of all, is your space, is your program, is the environment even conducive to the needs, interests, desires of students of color first? And then two, the innovation and creativity of thinking about script and writing and control of curriculum and or the artistry, and what does that power dynamic look like? So I think, in summarizing that, I think that, again, as folks on the call are thinking about, okay, how do I, actually implement some of these things? One is having the awareness that this is even important, but two, I think you've heard some good things here. I want to move on to talk a little bit about curriculum and pedagogy, because that's come up a little bit. And one thing, Don, you just mentioned is anti-racist folks and anti-racist, not non-racist, but anti-racist. And so one thing I'd like to ask you all to think about is, and to share, is how has curriculum or educational practices perpetuated stereotypical ideas about Black and Brown people? And what would an anti-racist curriculum look like in education? And then if you've done that, please, and briefly as possible, because there's a lot of us, so I want to try to get everybody some opportunity. Have you had any challenges in trying to move towards that direction? So what does an anti-racist curriculum look like? And then if you've tried that, what are some challenges that you maybe have had along the way?
I'll start oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Don.
I was going to say really quickly, at my school, I advocated for a theater for social justice class for the first time. Next year, I'm hoping to include a Black theater class as well. Okay. And for me, the struggle wasn't about people not wanting to do it. That wasn't the struggle. It was just more like, how do we work these logistics out? And my thing is, logistics, yes, I understand that they're a part of the process, but that shouldn't stop us because we don't have, there aren't enough classrooms or something like that. Something right. Can always be worked out.
Right. Tiffany, were you going to add something?
It was kind of a smart ass first answer, but followed up with similar to what Don was saying, in that an anti-racist curriculum is complete. And most of the curriculum that we're given and that we're taught in our educational system is not. It's whitewashed. And so we need to do two pieces to that, I think. The first one is, as educators, we can't rely on just what we were taught. We have to go out there and find the material and find the history and find the curriculum that we can then bring into our students and monitor and adjust as needed, because as Don said in the last question, all of our spaces and our students are so different, right? We need to monitor and make what works for our students. And then the second piece is that needs to start in the college prep programs. And every time an educator and a theater educator and all educators are being taught curriculum, there has to be an anti-racist lens on everything we do. It can't just be, here's a 1 semester diversity class, check. Now you know how to not be racist. So that's right. We're incomplete. We need to be complete.
Right. All right. So anyone else, any thoughts about that? Because I actually have to ask this question because I had the opportunity to be on a panel with some industry folks, and there was a student on there. I won't say their name because I think that may have been a safe space for that student. And there's educators on this call, so I don't know if that teacher is on this call. But there was a student who talked about wanting that a lot of their friends that were Black had got out of the class because the teacher had created or was facilitating a racist space, and that they wanted to stay in the space because they felt they had the need to represent and to be the voice of Black people and Black students in that. And so my question is, and I think this goes into this, because of systemic racism, sometimes white folks subconsciously can create spaces where youth of color don't feel welcomed or comfortable in majority spaces. What needs to happen in you all's opinion to dismantle that? Because I mean, I think out of the 300 plus students, for that student to get up there and say that and really almost be in tears about the experience, something needs to change. And so what needs to be done to dismantle that culture within theater education? Estella?
So I was to the last question, I was going to say, and this feeds into what you're saying now, or asking now, students have to be allowed or given the platform to lead, and educators, especially theater folk, need to take their egos all the way out of the scenario and follow students' leads, because they will tell us exactly what they want and need, in exactly the way that we need to provide it. And if we listened, we'd be able to take care of or meet those needs. And curriculum, like Tiffany was mentioning, you're right, it's absolutely incomplete. But then in 2020, teachers will continue to teach everything that they know is wrong. For what, I don't know, fear of having to come up with something new, or fear of having to do new research, or fear of it wasn't in that binder that's on my shelf that's super dusty. And I mean, I don't know what the issue is, but for example, 10th grade, I got to teach English too, because in California, you need your English credential to teach theater. But Of Mice and Men is in our 10th grade curriculum. Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, classic, great, I'm sure. There's a whole chapter where the N-word is used repeatedly. And every time we get to it, students are freaking out. They don't want to deal with that chapter. And then I have seniors who come to me and say, Miss, we're a brave new world. We got to that chapter, savage. And of course, the teachers have a habit of looking to that one Black kid or two Black kids in the class, waiting for them to be the spokesperson and the token and speak up on behalf of all Black children everywhere. That is ridiculously irresponsible. I had a teacher tell a student, they were in the middle of Gatsby talking about slang in the 1920s, and they wrote the N-word on the board as slang. And then proceeded to have a ridiculously terrible conversation, not contextualizing that at all the way it should have been. And so the students are telling us, they're right in front of us, telling us exactly what they need, want, exactly what is wrong and is making them uncomfortable. But we are not willing or ready to listen and then take immediate steps to change what we know is wrong. And like I mentioned earlier, providing space for healing and reconciliation.
Yeah.
We've wronged them.
And to add to that, Stella.
I got you next, Corey. Roberto, go for it.
Sorry, Corey. Listening to the students. We are right now nationally, culturally at a crossroads. We know that. What has been happening in the last 2 weeks, month, has changed American society, whether we want to or not, and hopefully for the better. But our students need to talk, and we need to listen as teachers. They need to guide us and take us down that road. As we teach them these old texts that you were mentioning, Stella, they're difficult to teach. Yes, and this is why we need to listen to them, because we can incorporate other texts and we can talk about other texts in addition for what is required. And now I'm going back to what Ms. Williams is saying. And this is why new works is an imperative goal that we need to keep in mind. Didn't mean to interrupt, Corey.
That's quite all right. I was going to just also add to that the comments prior to and say that teachers also need to move forward without fear, because the thing that happens so often is that you're afraid to touch the stove, and so you don't actually address the thing that's in the room, that's right there in front of you, that every kid knows is there, that as teachers is there, but you want to pretend because it makes you just a little bit uncomfortable. Or so instead, sometimes you seek shelter from the students, and particularly your students of color, about that, rather than being a leader for yourself. Because my father used to say, when you know what's wrong, it's wrong. And sometimes you are afraid to state what you know is wrong. And I think that the time has come for us to start doing that and for us to be brave. The very nature of an artist is to rebel. And so sometimes to shake things up just a little bit with your principals, to shake things up a little bit with your parents, so that you're having those conversations, can become necessary. The kids are asking for it, and we need to start delivering it.
Absolutely. I don't know if Devon, did you have anything? I didn't know if you want to jump in.
Well, to add on, I remember, based off experience, I've been brought in from a teacher, to work on a certain book or particular author or particular event. And the teacher brought me in because I'm kind of like the rebel. I can just go in there and say it and without any repercussions. And so with that being said, I think teachers need to get support from the higher ups, local leaders, principals, different companies. And I think that would help out parents, especially. If parents would help out and advocate for that, I think that would help out also. Rather than just, because I've had lots of talks with teachers after bringing in a certain workshop. They're thanking me because they've been trying to do this for years, and this was like a way of like sneaking it in, and it reminds me of the stories I heard of slavery when we were sneaking in, teaching people how to read, quietly. You couldn't tell everybody about the closed pages about how you were learning. And that's kind of what it feels like when I'm visiting these schools. So I think more support would help that also, because there are a lot of teachers that are trying to bring that in.
Estella?
Yeah, I want to add sort of larger context, or as we talk about like anti-racism, theater educators have to, I think, remember that this is this has a much larger scope than our theater spaces. And oftentimes drama teachers are the singletons on your campus. Sometimes you're lucky you've got a whole team of drama teachers in high school or secondary, middle school, but most often we're the only ones. I'm a singleton on my campus. And for this work, what Corey is saying about being brave is absolutely necessary, but it also absolutely requires that white teachers are going to co-conspire. Like white teachers have to ally, because as a union leader, there are a whole lot of things that I can do and say only because I know that my district is afraid of the word union. However, before I was a union leader, I was speaking up and on behalf of my students and doing what I felt I needed to do for them, but not enough teachers behind me. No, and my experience, which has been tumultuous, probably would have been much smoother had there been white allies standing right next to me and behind me saying, this is absolutely necessary and you need to support this educator. But as one of the handful of Black teachers in my district, the only drama teacher in my district, I cannot do this work without allies. It doesn't matter how brave I might be in a moment, but when the superintendent decides we're just going to cut off funding anyway, because he takes an issue with this skin, right? I need an ally next to me. And I don't even like the word ally, it feels too passive. I need a co-conspirator next to me.
Absolutely. And I want to, I think that's something we definitely wanted to touch on as we were preparing for our experience tonight. So I want to move into that. And Tiffany, I want to throw you a question, if you don't mind. So when we initially met, we shared about your commitment to being a voice and an ally, a co-conspirator for racial equity.
I like that, co-conspirator.
Yeah, it's now it comes with some responsibilities though.
It
So
does. It does.
So what was your process, in your opinion, of understanding the importance of this, and what advice would you have for other white educators trying to out their journey?
Well, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's
okay.
You got it.
I think I'll start with, it was a embarrassingly long process. I was raised, like a lot of us, that everybody's equal. And what I didn't realize is that didn't mean everybody was treated equally. And so I was pretty, I think it all came about when I realized that my naivete, that racism doesn't exist, needed to go away.
Mm.
And I was really fortunate about a third of the way through my teaching career to have a principal that was a very strong, passionate, intelligent Black woman. And she opened my eyes to the racism that was happening in our very own district. And the blinders kind of started to come off. And then I started to notice things that were happening or not happening with my students. The school that I teach in is about 20% white, and we have about 25 different languages in our student population. So lots of variations on student of color. And I started seeing things that when we would go to competitions, that my students of color weren't coming away with the ribbons. And when we would submit shows that were beautifully diverse, the white schools of privilege were getting chosen over and over again for the main stage shows. And this started some good discussions with my students. They were thankfully very open with me and would call me out on my privilege and the privilege of the system of educational theater. And so it kind of all came to a head when we put up a show called In the Heights for state, and it wasn't chosen. And instead, an all-white cast version of Once on This Island was put up on stage. And that was it for my students. They lost it, and I couldn't take it anymore. Their hearts were broken. So my choice was I could either remove my kids from thespians, or I could make some noise. And I decided action over retreat. And I asked, I challenged, I read. I did a lot of reflecting, and I listened to my kids a lot. And I kind of came away with three things with that. The first is that my students are not seeing themselves represented on stage, and it's damaging to them in an art form that is supposed to accept everyone as family, right? So they're invited to the party, but not to the table. And that everybody's lives are richer when we see, when we're exposed and learn from people who don't look like us. And then the third one is that our white students need to have experiences where they can relate to actors and characters of color on stage, because white kids can do that where the reverse doesn't happen. And especially when students of color in the audience see white actors playing characters of color, right? So it was going to be beneficial for everybody in Oregon Thespians, no matter what their race, if we could get more representation. And so I guess my advice for other white educators would be realize that woke is not a destination, it's a journey. And no matter where you are in that journey, there's still further to go. Read a lot. I know we all read scripts all the time, but this summer, find something else to read. If you feel like you're maybe in that naive space that I talked about, and some of this is uncomfortable for you, and you feel yourself kind of mentally arguing with some of the things that we're saying, this is the book for you to read. What does it mean to be white? It's by Robin DiAngelo. She's a white author. She does a really good job, I think, of explaining white to white about why, as white people, we have a hard time understanding systemic racism, or why we want to deny it. And there's a whole chapter in here devoted to the educational system. So this is a really great way to start. And I'm going on and on and on, but
I think this is good. Let me pass it on, because also we have to get to questions in a second.
Yes.
So thank you for that, Tiffany.
Yes.
Corey, did you want to jump in?
I just wanted to say one quick thing about that, because I also teach at a really racially diverse school, and it's about 60% students of color, about 40% white students. But the thing that has happened a lot when I hear people and I watch House Hunters and you hear them go, it's in a good school district, which generally means in a white school district, that's mostly. And so what happens is so many of our kids are raised to believe that their life is not any worse off without knowing people of color or having friends that are people that are Black,
Right.
or Latinx, all of those things. And so the tapestry that is available should be absolutely capitalized upon and celebrated and pushed for. So yeah, shut it.
Okay, so before we hop into questions, I wanted to see if anybody had a quick, because I think that what was shared was important. I know there was some interest to talk about recruitment as well, but I want to make sure that we move into questions. So are there any questions out there from any of you? I think there should be a chat function for you. And if you want to go ahead and raise your hand, we'll acknowledge you and you'll be taken off of mute. Let's see. I don't have the chat on my screen. Okay, we do have a raised hand.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
Hi, first guys, thank you so much for having this conversation tonight. I teach in a very affluent and predominantly white school, but I have a class this upcoming year that's all students of color from a various, like all different backgrounds. How can I, as a white teacher, introduce and teach them works written by people who reflect their voices, even though my voice is not reflected in those works, with credibility?
Anybody want to, Don, you want to start us?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to say, don't be afraid to create a devised work, and you can always use a work that's known to you as sort of like the story spine or a jumping off point, but don't be afraid of a devised work that is of their making, of their voices.
The second thing that I would like to say with that is, don't feel the need to be the expert in the room. That you can be a facilitator rather than a presenter with that, and give them the space and explore the text just as much with them, alongside them, as opposed to trying to feed it to them.
Similar to what Corey is saying, I think that in anti-racist work, like, it's important to be your authentic self, and that goes for everyone in the space. You need to be your authentic self and come to that work honestly, and allow yourself to be vulnerable. And as artists, that's something that we're supposed to all be good at, right? Like, so let yourself be vulnerable with your students, and exactly what Corey is saying, they're gonna support you through the process.
Yeah, and as Don pointed out, device work, that's a good idea. But also, yeah, don't become a director, become a mentor, and become a listener. Bring them in, let them teach you as you share with them your thoughts about the script, about theatrical possibilities, but do it through improvisation, device work, have them read, have them stage, write their own scenes, and have them rehearse those, holding the piece of paper, but put them to work. Get them involved in that room. Create a stage out of your classroom.
Can I jump on and
Yeah,
say that something that might happen is your students might shut down on you a little bit. And that's not because they don't want to do the work. It's because they have been socialized just like the rest of us that white people have the answers, and white theater has the answers, and they've been so there might be times when they're going to look to you and not want to give an answer. And so leading through questioning is a great way to be like, no, what do you think? And you might at some point have to say, this needs to come from you guys, right? This needs to come from you and what you think. And there are no wrong answers here. So let's just talk about what you think and what you want.
All right. All right. Let's go. Do we have another question out there?
Yeah, my name is Brooke. Hi. I also teach in a predominantly white school, but I get, some students of color every once in a while who want to dabble in our department. So I was fortunate. I had an amazing student of color who just blazed away for us to do things like To Kill a Mockingbird and Bring It On and things like that. But what do I do for my singleton students where I have, 1 or 2 students of color who are really talented? And I really want to give them a vehicle where they feel like they identify with that character. I learned so much from this one student, but I want to give more. I just don't have so many students in my department who benefit from, that same literature. So how can I, provide more literature? Like, what are your recommendations for that? And then what do I do for just, one student of color that is desperately wants to show her culture and wants to be proud of being Black, and what kind of plays can I put on for her or him?
Well, I can't answer the first or the second part of that, but the first part is to actively recruit and show the students that you are someone to be trusted, and literally walk up to a group of kids and say, have you thought about taking theater? Because what my grandfather used to say, you have not because you ask not, comes into play a lot, because the kids are talking to each other and they know who they can trust and they know who to steer clear of. So talk to them and let them know that you are here and that you're looking for them.
Yeah, I would say recruiting can be really difficult, and sometimes people have really different opinions about how do you recruit. But one thing that I know is that sometimes it can sometimes be direct and sometimes it's indirect. I've had a lot of success, believe it or not, talking to coaches. Sometimes when they're in sports or something, they're involved in other activities. I've had these other adults that have just sort of said, theater is okay, you can do that. And then that helps too.
It doesn't recruiting students, people of color, students of color to theater doesn't necessarily have to be for the stage also. So so I think sometimes students are put off because they can see, oh yeah, you're recruiting me because you want me to be that guy or girl. So I think just creating a space to add on, there's so many different avenues in theater. Maybe playwriting, maybe getting them to write for a scene or about an event. I think that's a way of easing them into the theater world. And maybe once they're in the theater world, once they're interested in the theater world, whether it's with the technical group or writing or directing, then you can, begin talking about stage play. And also, I think the personal recruitment, after, working with teachers and seeing how they recruit, I've seen that work, providing this comfortability level with students, and not just saying, oh, I have this wonderful play with a part that I think will work for you. I think if you go in there with just saying, I have a play, I think it's not going to work. So
sure, I didn't know if you were jumping in. Were you trying to jump in on this?
Yes, I'm going to jump in. I really feel as though, because this is something that's out of your element, Brooke, that it was Brooke, right?
Yes.
I didn't work. Okay. Is the fact that please make sure that you're in a position and you're ready before you really go out and start recruiting. You are experiencing something now. And I'll give you a really quick scenario. I was working with a young lady, a white lady who taught at a private girls' school. And she was upset because the African-American girls told her that she couldn't teach them the Negro spirituals. And she got upset, but she at least backed up long enough to come and talk to me about it. And she asked me to come in and talk to the entire school about that. But the whole thing of it was, yes, you're trying to teach them, you know, the music, but there's a lot more that goes into those Negro spirituals that you are not privy to. So listen to what they're saying. They're just saying, it's not you can't teach me the music, you just can't teach me how I should feel when I'm singing this. So just I invite, I never tell you what you should or could do. I invite that before you make that recruitment, be ready within yourself. Be ready within yourself.
I think we got one more question if we have time.
Yes, hi there. So my name is Isabel, and I'm a rising senior at a high school that, though largely white, does have a good amount of diversity. Yet my thespian troupe is entirely white. And in the past couple of years, we have done an all-white production of The Wiz that was, though obviously inappropriate, was not objected to at all by our community, and was an all-white version of Once on This Island was also very much on the table. And I, as a rising senior and a rising president of my troupe, feel like that is not a great place to be, and we need some forward movement. But I think a lot of the students of color in our school feel like we have made our theater and our music departments a place where they don't belong and are not welcome. So I'm wondering if you could maybe shed some wisdom on how I, as a rising student leader in my troupe, can help make our music and our theater departments a place where students of color feel welcome and foster an environment where their voice is welcome.
Thank you, Isabel, for that question. Similar to what I said earlier about educators, white educators preparing themselves to be co-conspirators, and like Tiffany has shared, jumping into certain readings and doing some self-reflective work, young people need to do that same level of work. As a rising senior and a Gen Z person, like this mess is unfortunately yours to inherit. And so, first of all, recognizing that is an issue and being very cognizant and aware that your troupe being all white is an issue and The Wiz all white is an issue, that is a great first step. And I encourage you to find the courage and the bravery to tell your director as such and make it very plain for your colleagues and the rest of the folks in your troupe. And then you yourself, the troupe members, I'd say demand, my students would demand of me that you switch up your tactics and do different plays and go recruit and invite folks and work to reshape what your image is to the rest of the student body. But the fact that you asked that question says that you are the person who probably should be helping to lead your troupe next year. And I encourage you to go ahead and do that.
Corey, I think you had no? Okay. All right. We have anybody else? Because that's going to be actually our last question. And so I do want to, and thank you for that question. I think, doing both of these, we had students who jumped in and asked some very courageous and brave questions, which shows that change and transformation are actually on the horizon, which is a good thing. Before we wrap up this evening from this very necessary and brave conversation, I just wanted to see if any of our esteemed educators, change makers, panelists, allies, co-conspirators had anything that you wanted to say in parting words of wisdom and or advice to the 100+ educators that came on tonight. Is there anything in 30 seconds or less that you'd like to say?
I think that right now we have to listen. This is the time, given what is happening in our nation, we have to talk to our students and we have to listen cautiously and carefully. Because if you think you have multiculturalism if you think you have race issues under control when you're doing your own craft, and that's not the case. Right now, the dialogue is totally different. We have to listen to how they feel. We have to enter in their shoes, and we have to walk their walk.
Yes, Don.
Really quick, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid that your question will be met with vitriol, or that you're going to ask it the wrong way. Get the conversation started. That's number one. Number two, don't stop. I mean, this is just our beginning. This is not our destination, as someone mentioned before. And the other thing is, there are small things that you can continue to do. There are more plays that you can read. There are just these small things that you can just continue to do, that you don't have to solve everything in one conversation. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Corey.
Very quickly, just two things. Number one, demystify your theater spaces. Stop making it so that that's the place where the white kids go, and come up with a couple of programs or do something that invites all, so that sometimes it's like the sieve. It's those that all come, and then somehow the sieve catches a few that stay. And number two, eliminate the question, what else do you want? I've done this, what else do you want, out of your vocabulary.
Cheryl?
Yes. Every day, my first day of class, I always, of a new class, walk in and I'll tell my students, I am not here to teach you. Everything you need to know is already in you. I'm just here to awaken that in which you are not aware of at this moment. There are things that you know that I'm not aware of, so let's get going.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Estella.
I think a lot of us in this space kind of already have the tools we need as theater artists, especially as improv artists. You know how to create a safe space on stage for your co-stars, and in creating a safe space to learn, it's the same principles, right? If there are any comedy sports folks out there, we watch each other's back and we make each other look good. And so if you apply that same lens and model to the way you dialogue about these really tough topics, then I think that you'll be okay. And I encourage folks to keep learning, both educators and students, keep reading and learning, and then remain mindful about the language that you use, because sometimes it's as simple as making sure that there's a term you're not using. Like, for example, colorblind. We're just gonna X that one out right now, and we're never gonna say it ever again in theater spaces anywhere. So keep learning and just remain mindful and fall back on your theater training, because we know how to be empathetic, tolerant, loving people.
Awesome. Devon?
I think this is to add on to what everybody was saying, I think it's the perfect time to put on productions that would provide open discussion before or about current events, and also provide open discussion like before or after the like right after the production, like getting Q&As from the audience to speak with the actors. And again, this is based on just being a part of productions with high schools, bringing in a high school or two high schools from two different sides of same town with two different towns to see the same play. Like I've done a play about, it's called The Town Divided, but it's based on Romeo and Juliet. But it was based on just the separation of the difference of the society and between the tracks. It was separated by tracks, and the North and the South, and we had schools from both sides go see this play, and it opened up talks. It had students who never met each other, never knew each other, becoming friends, and it actually got students of color actually interested in theater, because that was a play they were able to connect to. So I know there are plays that are out there that could open up talks, and also I think if you're able to get feedback from students that are seeing these plays, I think that would help recruitment also.
Awesome. And Tiffany?
I was loving everything that everyone was saying. I think if you're a white theater educator, don't let your guilt make you think you have to fix everything all at once. it's a long marathon. Pick 1 or 2 things that you can do this year and really focus on doing those well. And I want to echo what other people in the panel are saying. Just listen to your kids. Just listen to them openly and with an open heart. And they know, right? We all know teenagers know BS when they see it.
And on that note, I want to thank you all for your transparency today, your authenticity, your bravery. And I want to thank everyone who stayed and had the conversation. You know, again, we're at a time in history where we're looking for co-conspirators and folks who really want to create a new society and a new tomorrow. But that starts today. And so I hope that you gained something today. I hope you took a nugget of knowledge away. I hope that you were inspired to go back and at least start to lead some sort of advocacy and change within your community. But even more so that you center your students, your Black and brown students of color, and begin to see them and engage them and center them in your experience. Panelists, you're awesome. Thank you. It was great to work and talk to you all tonight. Everyone have a great evening and be well.